Hi everyone, myself Dr. M. Lakshmi Prasad, working as an Associate Professor in the Department of Data Science in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So in this video, I'm going to discuss about principles of data management. So before going to see that, so what is the data? So data is nothing but observations or evidences about the social world, and the data is nothing but a plural of data, and which can be of two types in nature. So that one is quantitative data and qualitative data. And data is to be produced, and then mainly what the researchers want actually. So how we're going to collect the data. So that and all is very important for the researchers. So let me see the difference between how the data is going to be converted in the form of information. So the terms data and then informations are used interchangeably, and however the terms have different distinct meanings here. So if I consider the data here, so the data may be nothing but a facts, or it may be events, or it may be transactions, so which have been recorded. And then the data is nothing but input raw materials from which the information is processed. So this is nothing but data. And while it comes to information, the data that have been produced in several ways that has to be useful to the recipient, that should be nothing but information. So the basic data are processed in some way to form the information, right? So the information is nothing but the data that have been produced in several ways as useful to the recipient. But data is nothing but facts, events, transaction that has been recorded. And then so the data is nothing but the input raw materials from which the information is processed. And then information is nothing but the basic data that is processed in some way from the information. So next I'm going to discuss about what is the nature of the data. So the research studies in behavioral science are mainly concerned with characteristics or traits. Thus, the tools are administered to quantify these characteristics. But all the traits and characteristics cannot be quantified here. So the data can be classified broadly into two categories. So first one is qualitative data or attributes, and then second one is that quantitative data or variables, like that. So the data will be of two types, qualitative data and then quantitative data. So when it comes to nature of data, just now I said the data will be of two types, right? Qualitative data, or I can able to classify the data based on the attributes also. And second one is that quantitative data, so where the data is going to be classified based on the variables here. So what is qualitative data actually? So the characteristics or traits from which the numerical value cannot be assigned or called attributes. Example, gender, motivation, etc. And similarly, when it comes to quantitative data, so the characteristics or traits from which numerical value can be assigned or called variables. Example, height, weight, etc. Right? So these are the basic differences between the qualitative data and then quantitative data. So qualitative data is nothing but the characteristics or traits from which the numerical value cannot be assigned or called attributes. Example, gender and motivation. And then quantitative data is nothing but the variables, like the characteristics or traits for which a numerical value can be assigned or called variables. Example, height and then weight here. So and next one is that constants. So what is a constant and what is a variable? So many of them know that what is a constant. So constant is nothing but a condition, or it may be characteristic that is same for all the observed units or sample subjects of a study. So constant is nothing but a condition, or it may be characteristic that should be same for all the observed units. And then when it comes to variables, so the variables is nothing but it should be also a characteristic or the trait in the behavioral science, so which can be quantified in terms of variable here, right? So these variables will be of two types. So first one is continuous variable and second one is discrete variables. So there is a lot of difference between constant and then variables. So constant is nothing but a conditional characteristic for which should be same for all the observed units, whereas when it comes to variables, so the variables is also nothing but a characteristic or trait in the behavioral science which may be quantified in terms of a variable, and this variable will be of two types like continuous variables and discrete variables. So what is a continuous variable and what is a discrete variable? Let's see now. So continuous variable is nothing but the characteristic whose observation can take any values over the particular range. So that one you can able to call it as a continuous variable. So the characteristic whose observation can take any values over a particular range. So and then it can also assure either fractional or integer values. So example, so the weight of the children in kg, height, height in points. So the continuous variable can also assure either fractional or integer values. So example, weight of the children in kg and height in points. And while comes to this discrete variables, so these discrete variables are those on the other hand, so which exist only in units, not the fractional value. So that is the difference between the continuous variable and then discrete variable. So example of this discrete variable will be number of cat rate points in the village and WC count by plus cells count, like that, right? So the discrete values is nothing but these are not the fractional values. So example, number of cat rate points in a village and then WC count here. So let me see explain that what is the difference between the attribute and variable. So attribute is nothing but a category of characteristic to which a subject either belongs or does not belong, or the property that a subject is either possess or does not possess. That should be an attribute here. So the category of a characteristic to which a subject either belongs or does not belong, or the property that a subject either possesses and does not possess is nothing but an attribute here. So similarly, when it comes to variable, so the variable describes the characteristics in terms of numerical value which is expressed in units of measurement here. So that should be the variable. So the variable describes a characteristic in terms of numerical value which is expressed in the units of measurement. And then the second difference is that so the attributes become sick and describing the blood group, etc. here. And then variables are nothing but height, weight, blood pressure, and age of the point. So these are the examples. So examples of that attribute and then variable. So let's see in detail about what should be qualitative data. So there is no notion of magnitude of size of the characteristic is nothing but the qualitative data, and they are just categorized here, and then here this data is going to be classified by counting the individuals having the same characteristic or attribute or not by an measurement here. So already just now I said what is the qualitative data. So if I take a gender as an example, so that should be male or female here. Suppose if I take a disease example, so whether disease present or not, like that. And then smoke, whether he is a smoking person or not smoking person. Like this I can able to identify the qualitative data. And these data can be measured in terms of nominal scales and then ordinal scales only, right? So the qualitative data is nothing but a notion of magnitude of the size of the characteristic, mainly depends, and this qualitative data can be categorized, and this data is going to be classified by counting the individuals having the same characteristic or the attribute and not by the measurement here. So examples: gender, disease, smoke. So if I take gender, male or female, and disease means present or not, absent, and smoke means smoking person or not smoking person, and this qualitative data can be measured in terms of nominal and then ordinal scales. So anything that can be expressed in terms of a number or a quantity or a magnitude, that is nothing but quantitative data. So anything which is going to be expressed as a number or quantity or magnitude, so that one you can able to call it as a quantitative data. And this quantitative data describe the characteristics, so in terms of numerical value, so which is measured in the units of measurement here. So the characteristics is going to be described in terms of numerical value, so which are expressed in units of measurements. So example, what is the level of hemoglobin in the blood, and then number of glaucoma points, and then intraocular pressure, and then weight, etc. And this quantitative data observations is going to be identified by the each individual, which is going to be represented in the form of a number here. And this data can be measured in interval and ratio scales only. So these are the two ways where we can able to measure this quantitative data. So in this video I'm going to discuss about, so what are the various sources of the data. So mainly this data is going to be classified into two types. So first one is primary data, and then second one is that secondary data. So the data is going to be classified into two categories. So first one is primary data, and then second one is secondary data. So what is primary data? So the primary data are those gathered from the primary source. So the data which is going to be gathered from primary source is nothing but the primary data. And then the primary data are as follows. So the data which is going to be collected from an individual person, and the data which is going to be collected from an organized group, and then the data which is going to be collected from established practices. So this and all the data what we gather you can consider as the primary data. And then similarly this data what we are getting from the documents in original forms, and the data from the living organisms, and the data what we are collecting from the man-made material things, and then the data from the natural objectives and phenomena. So these are the data what we come from the different sources. Those data can able to call it as a primary source. So the data which is going to be gathered from primary source, and then the data which is going to be collected from an individual person and an organized group and then established practices, as well as the data which is going to be gathered from the document in the form of original forms, and the data which is going to be gathered from living organisms and man-made material things, and then general objectives, natural objectives and phenomena. So this is the data we can able to call it as the primary data. Similarly, when it comes to secondary data, so the data which is going to be gathered from the secondary sources, those data we can able to call it as the secondary data. So the data which is going to be gathered from secondary source or second sources, that one we can able to call it as the secondary data. And this secondary data will be come from the books, and then articles published, and then unpublished master degree, and then monograms or manuscript, etc., and then all other second-hand sources. So the data which is coming from the books, as well as this from the articles published, and then unpublished master degree, as well as monograms or manuscript, and all other secondary sources will be considered as the secondary data. And the next one I'm going to explain what are the advantages of primary data over the secondary data. So the primary data frequently give the detailed definition of the terms and statistical units used in the survey. So the primary data main advantage is that this data we can able to give the detailed definition of terms and statistical units that are used in the survey here. And then the second advantage of primary data over the secondary data is that, so the secondary data have usually little or no explanatory notes, which often arises from the transcriptions of the figure from the original primary source. right? So the secondary data has usually a little and no explanatory notes are available, which may often arises from the transcriptions of the figures or from the original primary source. And the next advantage is that the primary data usually includes the copy of the schedule as well as the description of the procedure that is used in the selection of the type of the sample and in the collecting the data. So this gives the user as well as the areas of the accuracy, applicability and limitation of the survey result may easily identified. So the primary data can be usually includes a copy of the schedule and the description of the procedure. So usually in the selection of the type of the sample in collecting the data. So like this kind of information able to gives the user as well as the ideas of the accuracy, applicability and limitation of the survey result. And the next advantage is that so the primary data are usually broken down into finer classifications, whereas the secondary data often omit the past of the combining categories, like such as barriers instead of studios or municipalities instead of barriers. So this is the fourth advantage. So the primary data can be usually broken down into finer classifications, and then this secondary data often omit the past of combining categories such as barriers and then municipalities instead of barriers. Then what are the advantages of secondary data? So the secondary data is more convenient to use because they are already condensed and then organized. So this is the best advantage of the secondary data. Since the secondary data is coming from the secondary sources, so it is easy to and more convenient to use it because they are already condensed and then organized. And then the analysis and interpretation are almost all done, and then it should be get very easily also. And then the libraries that make secondary data are more easily accessible. So these are the advantages of the secondary data. And in next one, I'm going to explain what are the categories of the data gathered from the respondent. So before that, I have to know, I have to tell about the respondents. So respondents are those individuals who are asked or requested by the researcher to supply data or information about his research problem. So respondent is also a normal person or individual, so who are asked or requested by a researcher to supply the data or the information about his research problem is nothing but respondent. Then the categories of the data gathered from the respondents will be of different types. So first one will be facts. So facts are nothing but personal circumstances and then what they do. And then second one is that attitudes and then feelings as well as judgments and then psychometric skills. So like this, these are the various categories that has data which is going to be gathered from the respondents. And apart from that, so the results of the test and experiments would also be gathered from the respondent, and also all other data gathered from the primary and the secondary source also. So what are the several ways of selecting the method of collecting data? So what are the various tools or researchers instruments are available here? So very first one is that clerical tools, we can able to call it. So these clerical tools are nothing but which includes different types of methods like a questionnaire method. So the questionnaire method is very first one, and then interview method, and then empirical observation method, and then registration method, and then testing method, and then experimental method, and then library method. So these are the various methods that are available in the clerical tool. So the questionnaire method. So questionnaire method means where the questionnaire can able to answer the question to the respondent here. And then interview methods. So interview method, so conducting the interviews where the able to gather the data from the uh, users. And then empirical observation method. So empirical observation method is the method where you can directly observe the methods from the data. And then registration method. So registration method where you can able to gather the data. So this is the other way. And then testing method. So testing method mainly concentrates on the scientist where the test can be carried out. And then empirical method, and then library method. So these are the various methods that are available in the curricle tools. And then next one is mechanical devices. So what are the various mechanical devices that are available for gathering the data here? So very first one is microscopes, so which can able to gather the data. And then thermometers is another type of the mechanical device where can be able to capture the data. And then cameras, so from the image also I can able to gather the data. And then rulers, so it is another type of mechanical device that are available in the markets. And then monitors, through monitors I can able to see the data easily. So these are the various mechanical devices that are available to capture the data. So in this video I'm going to discuss about what are the various forms of the data. So there already you know that the data is going to be classified into two types, like qualitative data and then quantitative data. So these are the two types of the data what I discussed previously in previous videos, right? So when it comes to qualitative data, so this qualitative data is again categorized into two types. So first one is that nominal data, and then second one is that ordinal data. So the nominal data is nothing but gender, like women and then men, and then hair color, whether it is blonde or brown in color, and then ethnicity, Hispanic or Asian. So like this, the nominal data will be. So it may be a gender or hair color and ethnicity, like that. So these are the examples of the nominal data. And again, so this qualitative data secondary type will be ordinal data. So ordinal data means so the first, second, and third, and then letters like letters, and then grades like A, B, C, and then economic status like low, medium, high, like that. So these are the some of the examples of the ordinal data. So it may be ranks, whether it may be first, second, and third, and then it may be a rank, it may be letters or grades like ABC, and then economic status like low and medium. So, and another kind of data is quantitative data. This quantitative data will be of two types again. So first one is discrete data and second one is continuous data. So discrete data again will be of uh, the examples of discrete data will be the number of students in the class, and the number of workers in the company, and the number of homes runs in a baseball game. So these are the some of the examples of the discrete data here. So the discrete data is nothing but the number of students in the class, number of home runs in a basketball game, and the number of workers in the company. And similarly, the second type of data in quantitative is that continuous data. So continuous data is nothing but height of the children. So the height every year, the height of the children varies, right? So this should be continuous in nature. So that's why this kind of data will be considered as a continuous data. And then the square footage of the two-bedroom house, and then the speed of the cars. The speed of the cars may vary continuously, right? So that's why this should be able to call it as a continuous data. So let me remind again. So the data will be of two types. So first one will be qualitative data, and second one is quantitative data. So the quantitative data will be of again two types. So first one is nominal data and then ordinal data. So the nominal data is nothing but gender, and then hair color, and then ethnicity. So these are the data which comes under nominal data. And then the ranks are then letters or grades, and then economic status. So this and all comes under ordinal data. So they know ordinal data. So like that. So these are the two types of qualitative data. Similarly, when it comes to quantitative data, this quantitative data will be again two types, so discrete data and then continuous data. So the discrete data is nothing but number of students in the class and the number of workers that are working in the company and the number of home runs in the baseball game. So this data will come under discrete one. And similarly, the height of the children, speed of the car, and the square footage of two-bedroom house. So this and all will come under quantitative data. So the quantitative data and then qualitative data differences. Let me explain that. So if I took quantitative data, so the quantitative data can be expressed as a number and or it can be quantified. So that should be the quantitative data. So the quantitative can be expressed as a number here, whereas in qualitative data it cannot be expressed as a number and it cannot be measured. So that is the first difference. Similarly, the quantitative data can be measured by numerical variables. So whereas the qualitative data consists of words, pictures, symbols, and not the numbers. So this data will be considered as a qualitative data. So the data which is going to be expressed in the form of a number or quantified, then it should be quantitative data. The qualitative data which cannot be expressed as a number and cannot be measured, that kind of data will be qualitative data. So example, words, pictures, symbols. So this and all comes under qualitative data. So let me explain what are the various examples of quantitative data. So the quantitative data will be the scores on the tests, on exams like 85, 67, 90. Similarly, the weight of a person or a subject, and then your shoe size, and then temperature in the room, like that. So these are some of the examples of quantitative data. And then the colors like color of the sea, and then your favorite holiday destination like Hawaii, New Zealand, and then names as John, Patricia, and then ethnicity such as American, Indian, or Asian, like that. So this and all will be the examples of qualitative data, and these and all will be the examples of quantitative data. And then next we will see what is the difference between the nominal data and then ordinal data. So the nominal data is going to be used for labeling variables and then without any type of quantitative value. And then this ordinal data which is going to be placed into some kind of order by their position on the scale. So that should be ordinal data. So the nominal data is going to be used for labeling variables without any type of quantitative value. The name nominals come from the Latin word nomen, which means that name. So the name which is going to be referred should be considered as the nominal data, and ordinal data is one which is going to be placed in some kind of order by their position of the scale. Then that should be ordinal data. So the nominal data just name a thing without applying it in order. So then that should be nominal one. So actually this nominal data could just be the labels. So the names and then labels. So those two will becomes under the nominal one. And then ordinal data may indicate the superiority, and then however we cannot do this arithmetic with ordinal numbers because they are going to show only the sequence. So the sequencing and ordering their positions, that is nothing but the ordinal data. So what are the examples of nominal data and ordinal data? So the examples is the gender. So gender is either women or men, and then hair color, whether it is brown, black, red, whatever it may be, and then martial status like married, single, widow, and ethnicity like Hispanic or Haitian. Similarly, the examples of ordinal data. So first, second, third, competition, and letter grades like ABC. When a company asks a customer to rate the salesperson on this sales experience on the scale of 1 to 10, and then economic status like low, medium, high, like that. So this and all will be the various examples of the ordinal data. So The nominal data example will be gender, either it may be woman or men, and then hair color, light red, blue, green, like that, and then marital status like married, single, and then widow, and ethnicity Hispanic and Asian. So these are the examples of that nominal data. And then what are the examples of that ordinal data? So it should maybe the position, or it may be a superiority. So that kind of data will comes under the ordinal. So first, second, third, and letter grades like A, B, C. And then when a company asks the customer to rate that sales experience on the scale of 1 to 10, and then economical status like low, medium, high, this and all will comes under ordinal data. And then next, I'm going to discuss the difference between what should be the discrete data and continuous data. So discrete data is nothing but it is a count that involves only the integers, and then this discrete data values cannot be subdivided into parts. And for example, the number of children in the class is discrete data, so cannot count 1.5 kids like that. So this should be the discrete data. So the discrete data is the count, so that involves only the integers, and then the discrete values cannot be subdivided into parts. And for example, the number of children in a class is discrete data, and then you cannot the count as 1.5 like that. That should be the discrete one. And then when it comes to continuous data, so the continuous data could be meaningfully divided into finite levels, and this can be measured on the scale or continuous and can have any numeric value also. For example, you can measure your height at very precise scales like meters, centimeters, and then millimeters, etc. Like that. Okay, so the continuous data could be meaningfully divided into finite number of levels, and it can be measured on the scale or continuous and have many numeric value. For example, if you measure the height in very precise scales like meter, centimeter, and millimeter. So, and what are the examples of the discrete one now? So, the number of students in the class should be discrete, and the number of workers in a company is discrete, and the number of home runs in baseball ball is a discrete one, and then the number of test questions you answer correctly is the discrete. So, these are the various examples of that discrete data. And what are the examples of this continuous data? Would be amount of time required to complete the project, and then the height of the children, and square footage of the 2 bedroom house, and then the speed of the cars, like this. So this and all will be the examples of continuous data, right? So the time, and then temperature, speed of the car, and then this will comes under the examples of the continuous data. And the next we'll see about measurement scale. So this measurement scale will be of again categorized based on the type of the data. So the choice of the appropriate statistical technique depends upon the type of the data in the question actually. So if I take a qualitative data, and then the measurement scales will be nominal and then ordinal, and then if I take quantitative data, the scale will be interval scale and then ratio scale. So these are the various levels of measurement that comes in qualitative data and then quantitative data. So let's see one by one what is the nominal scale. So nominal scale is nothing but so the least precise of the basic scales of the measurement should be the nominal scale. So it may also implies the classification of items into 2 or more categories without any extent or magnitude. So there is no particular order assigned to them, and then the frequency or the numbers are used to given a name to the something that may be used for determining the person or more. Suppose example boys and girls, pass and fail, and rural and urban. So like this, we can able to uh, give the examples for the nominal scale. So the nominal scale is nothing but this should be the least precise basic scales of measurement, and then we should able to imply the classification of item into 2 or more categories, and then there is no particular order assigning to them, and then the frequency of the numbers that are going to be used to given a name to something that may be used for determining the percent or more. So example, boys, girls, pass, fail, rural and urban, like that. So this and all will comes under nominal data scale. And the next one is that ordinal scale. So the ordinal scale is more precise scale than the nominal scale, and then the variables here has been categorized and then leveled up with the meaningful natural order, and but there is no information about the interval. So example, pain, none, mild, moderate, severe, so like that. So if you are having more than two of that, then it should comes under ordinal scale. So the ordinal scale is more precise scale than the nominal scale, and then the variables that have been categorized here and then leveled also with some meaningful natural order, but there is no information about the interval. So example, pain, so none, mild, moderate and severe. And next one is that interval scale. So interval scale is more precise and refined scale than the nominal one and the ordinal scales. So interval scale is more better than that of nominal and then ordinal scale. So this scale has all the characteristics and relationship of the ordinal scales, besides which distances between any two numbers on the scale are known here. The size of interval between two observations can be measured also, and then the temperature of the body is the example of the interval scale. So the interval scale is more precise than the nominal one or ordinal one, and the size of interval is to be done between the two observations that can be measured, and the temperature of the body is the example of the interval scale. And then next one is the ratio scale. So ratio scale means it has the same properties as the interval scale, as well as it is having either true or absolute zero value. So the ratio scale has the same properties as the interval scale, as well as it is true or absolute zero value. So the ratio scale numericals have qualities of real numbers and can be added, subtracted, multiplied and then divided. So the ratio scale numerical has uh, have values, so that can be added and then subtracted and then multiplied and then divided also. So example, mean systolic BP. So this is one of the example of that ratio scale here. So the ratio scale means, so it has the property as well as interval scale, as well as it is going to maintain the true and absolute zero value, and then these values of the ratio scales can be added, subtracted, multiplied and mean systolic BP also. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.